like that. That's something that's special for me because I don't do that with everybody. Like,
right,
you gotta be my own man.
right.
And if you my own man, you gonna get it for free.
Philadelphia. To many, the name brings to mind history, resilience, and the very spirit of America's founding. Tourists come to see the Liberty Bell, to walk the cobblestone streets where revolutionaries once dared to dream of independence, and to taste the city's famous cheesesteaks. Skyscrapers reflect the morning sun, while the Schuylkill River winds through the heart of the city. On the surface, Philadelphia is alive with culture, commerce, and heritage. But beneath this proud exterior lies another story. It is the story of men and women sleeping in doorways just blocks from Independence Hall. It is the sound of children crying softly inside temporary shelters. It is the reality of tents lining sidewalks, where life has been reduced to survival from one day to the next. This is the Philadelphia that rarely makes it into glossy brochures. This is a Philadelphia that forces us to ask, how can a nation built on liberty and opportunity allow so many of its people to live without shelter, without safety, and without hope? The crisis of homelessness in Philadelphia is not just a statistic or a passing headline. It is urgent, it is visible, and it is devastating. To understand it, we must look closely, not only at the streets themselves, but at the lives unfolding upon them. We must see the humanity in those who have been pushed to society's margins. We must confront the reality of homeless in America, the reality of homelessness in Philadelphia. In recent years, the crisis of homelessness in Philadelphia has not merely grown, it has become a steady, unrelenting tide. What once seemed like isolated hardships has transformed into a persistent trend that affects every corner of the city. Families who once managed to hold on, balancing meager paychecks against rising bills, now find themselves suddenly unable to afford rent. Parents who work long hours, hoping to secure a stable future for their children, wake up to the reality that even full-time employment no longer guarantees a roof overhead. At the same time, individuals struggling with untreated mental health conditions slip through the cracks of an underfunded system, their needs ignored until the only option left is the street. All the while, the opioid epidemic has wrapped its arms tightly around entire neighborhoods, pulling countless lives into its suffocating grip. What emerges from these forces is a cycle that feels inescapable. Poverty strips away financial security, leading to eviction or foreclosure. The trauma of losing one's home deepens vulnerability to addiction and illness, and once those struggles take hold, the path back to stability becomes harder with each passing day. For thousands, life becomes a revolving door of hardship, spinning without pause, where each setback leads seamlessly to the next. The face of homelessness in Philadelphia is far more complex than the stereotypes suggest. On one block, you might meet a father who once held a steady job but could no longer keep pace with soaring rent. A few steps later, you might see a mother gently tucking her child into a shelter bed, fighting to keep at least a semblance of normalcy alive. Veterans who once wore uniforms with pride now carry everything they own in a single bag. Elderly individuals, once cared for by families, now find themselves alone and exposed to the elements. Teenagers wander with nowhere to go, while infants begin their lives already marked by instability. Mental illness plays a cruel and devastating role in this reality. Anxiety and depression erode hope. Schizophrenia and other untreated conditions leave individuals vulnerable, isolated, and misunderstood. Past trauma, whether from abuse, violence, or war, pushes many to the breaking point. Addiction then sharpens the spiral. turning survival into a daily gamble. And perhaps most heartbreaking of all, more and more children appear among the homeless. Children whose laughter should echo in playgrounds, not fade into the background of shelter walls. These young lives grow up surrounded by uncertainty, carrying emotional scars that may shape them long into adulthood. The causes are clear, yet intertwined in ways that resist simple solutions. Housing costs in Philadelphia have risen dramatically, far outpacing wages. Affordable housing is so scarce that waiting lists stretch for years, leaving families stranded in limbo. The opioid crisis continues to ravage communities, with Kensington as its tragic epicenter. Mental health services remain underfunded and inaccessible, leaving those in need with nowhere to turn. And yet, behind every policy failure, every statistic, every data point, there is a human story. There is a father, a mother, a son, a daughter. Behind every number, there is a face. The neighborhood's at the heart of the crisis. Kensington's a name spoken in Philadelphia with a mixture of sorrow and fear. Once a proud working-class neighborhood, where families built their lives around factories, schools, and corner stores, it now bears the heavy scars of economic decline and the relentless opioid epidemic. Walking through Kensington today is like stepping into a portrait of both resilience and despair. The remains of once bustling factories loom like hollow monuments to a vanished era. Beneath the elevated train tracks, tents and makeshift shelters cluster together, offering fragile protection from the elements. On the sidewalks, people slump in exhaustion, hunger, or the suffocating grip of addiction. In this place, poverty and homelessness collide with substance use disorder in raw, visible ways that are impossible to ignore. And yet, Kensington is not solely a story of despair. Within its streets beats a stubborn heart of resilience. Residents who refuse to leave their neighborhood work tirelessly to preserve what remains of its spirit. Activists hand out food, water, and clean supplies to those in need. Volunteers walk the blocks daily, offering compassion where judgment too often dominates. For every tent that signals hardship, there is also an act of kindness that signals humanity. Kensington, in its painful reality, reveals both the fragility of human life and the remarkable endurance of the human spirit. Just a few miles away, the story changes, but the contradictions deepen. Center City, Philadelphia's economic and cultural core, rises with glass towers, grand theaters, upscale restaurants, and hotels that welcome visitors from around the world. Tourists wander through historic squares, retracing the footsteps of revolutionaries, while professionals in press suits hurry between meetings. It is the polished, glittering face of the city. But on nearly every block, another reality interrupts the illusion. A man curls up in a sleeping bag on the steps of a bank that holds millions in assets. A cardboard sign rests quietly against the wall outside a luxury hotel, its simple plea for help ignored by streams of hurried passers-by. A woman, her voice barely audible, asks for change as waves of business suits and briefcases stride past without a glance. Here, the contradiction of homeless in America is at its darkest. Immense wealth and devastating poverty, occupying the same space, separated only by a few feet of pavement, yet by an immeasurable gulf of circumstance. Beyond Kensington and Center City, homelessness reaches into every corner of Philadelphia. It is not confined to a single district or a handful of blocks. It spreads across the city like a shadow that refuses to lift. In North Philadelphia, abandoned row homes stand as silent reminders of decline, many now serving as temporary refuge for those with nowhere else to go. In South Philadelphia, alleyways hide small encampments from view, under bridges and along the river. Improvised shelters rise and fall as people are forced to move again and again. West Philadelphia, too, feels the weight of the crisis, where families in need cling to community even as stability slips away. Homelessness is not just present in Philadelphia. It is woven into the fabric of its neighborhoods, shaping how the city looks, how it feels, and how its people live. The human cost of homelessness in Philadelphia. The toll of homelessness in Philadelphia cannot be measured only in numbers. It is written in the bodies, minds, and spirits of those who endure it day after day. Winters in the city are punishing. with icy winds that slip under thin blankets and pierce the skin as if the cold itself were an enemy. On freezing nights, even the simplest act of trying to fall asleep becomes a battle for survival. Summer brings no relief. Instead, scorching heat turns tents and sidewalks into ovens. Dehydration, exhaustion, and heat stroke claim lives just as the bitter cold does. For those without shelter, the very rhythm of the seasons is an endless cycle of danger. Health unravels quickly when the streets are home. Minor injuries, cuts, burns, or blisters easily become infected, and without treatment, they grow into life-threatening conditions. Respiratory illnesses sweep through crowded shelters, spreading faster than medical staff can keep up. Malnutrition weakens the body. Meanwhile, mental health deteriorates under the weight of constant uncertainty. Trauma compounds trauma. A night of violence, the loss of a friend to overdose, another day of being invisible to the world. Depression deepens, while feelings of shame and worthlessness cling like a second skin. Many live with invisible wounds, PTSD from assaults, grief that never finds closure, and the crushing silence of being ignored. And through it all, there is always the desperate struggle to hold on to dignity, to remember that one is more than the label of homeless. The strain reaches beyond individuals. Hospitals and emergency rooms are overwhelmed, forced to care for patients whose illnesses stem not only from medical conditions but from the absence of safe shelter. Paramedics return again and again to the same blocks, the same faces, responding to crises that feel endless. Shelters are overcrowded, unable to meet the demand, and the pressure ripples outward into every corner of the city's services. Public spending on healthcare, policing, and social programs rises sharply. Yet, even as budgets grow, lives still slip through the cracks. Philadelphia does not just shoulder a financial cost, it carries a moral one too. Each life lost to neglect or indifference is a measure of what the city has failed to protect. The consequences are felt by the community as well. Residents speak of unease when walking home at night, not always out of fear of people experiencing homelessness, but out of fear of what their presence reflects, a society unable or unwilling to care for its most vulnerable. Tourists leave the city with conflicting impressions. The beauty of historic landmarks standing beside the undeniable reality of men and women sleeping on sidewalks. For children growing up without stable housing, the effects are especially devastating. School attendance falters, friendships fracture as families move from shelter to shelter, and the constant instability becomes a weight that presses down on their futures before those futures even begin. The divide between rich and poor grows wider as visible suffering becomes part of the city's landscape. Misunderstandings deepen, fear replaces empathy, and stereotypes build walls between neighbors. But the truth remains inescapable. When one group of people suffers so visibly and so profoundly, the entire community suffers with them. Homelessness is not a burden carried only by those on the streets. It is a reflection of the values, priorities, and conscience of the city itself. The hidden causes behind the crisis. To truly understand the scale of Philadelphia's homelessness crisis, we must go beneath the surface and examine its roots. The tents, the shelters, the visible suffering, these are only the symptoms. The real story lies deeper, in systems that have failed and in conditions that have quietly worsened year after year. At the center of it all is housing. The lack of affordable housing is the single greatest driver of homelessness in Philadelphia. For families already balancing on the edge of poverty, one rent increase or one missed paycheck is enough to push them into the streets. Waiting lists for subsidized housing stretch for years, leaving people in limbo with no safe place to go. Meanwhile, rents continue to climb far faster than wages. A family may have two working parents, both holding jobs, yet still find themselves unable to secure a permanent home. In a city where housing should provide stability and safety, it has become an unreachable dream for thousands. The crisis of opioids deepens the wound. Nowhere is this clearer than in Kensington, where the epidemic has reshaped entire streets into open-air battlefields against addiction. For many, the slide into homelessness begins with substance use, but just as often, Homelessness is what drives people towards substances in the first place, seeking relief, however temporary, from the constant grind of pain and hopelessness. Without access to meaningful treatment and recovery programs, the cycle becomes nearly impossible to escape. Addiction feeds homelessness, and homelessness feeds addiction, until the two are bound tightly together in lives that unravel in public view. Mental health is another route that runs deep and wide. Services are scarce, funding is stretched thin, and stigma remains a powerful barrier. Many people in crisis suffer silently, unable to find or afford professional care. For some, the streets become the only place left when untreated anxiety, depression, or schizophrenia drives them away from families, jobs, or stability. These are not failures of individuals. They are failures of a system that has long neglected the importance of mental health care. And then there is the matter of inequality itself. Philadelphia is a city of sharp contrasts. Gleaming skyscrapers rising above neighborhoods where families scrape by, universities with billion-dollar endowments beside blocks where children go hungry, entire neighborhoods flourish with opportunity while others collapse under the weight of disinvestment. This economic divide widens year after year, creating a city where prosperity and poverty live side by side but might as well be worlds apart. The roots of Philadelphia's homelessness crisis are tangled, interconnected, and deep, yet they are not invisible. They can be traced, understood, and confronted. Only by acknowledging them honestly can the city hope to break free from the cycle that keeps thousands of its residents trapped in the margins. From crisis to hope, building a way forward. If Philadelphia's homelessness crisis is a story of broken systems and fragile lives, then the path forward must be one of both urgency and vision. Solutions cannot be limited to bandages placed over deep wounds. They must heal at the surface while also addressing the roots. There is no single cure, but there are steps, both immediate and long-term, that can begin to turn despair into hope. The most urgent need is survival. Winters in Philadelphia are merciless, and summers can be just as unforgiving. Expanding the number of emergency shelters, especially during the coldest months, is not just a policy choice. It is the difference between life and death for many. But shelter must mean more than a bed for a night. It must mean safety, warmth, and dignity. Outreach teams are equally vital. Walking the streets to meet people where they are, connecting them with food, hygiene supplies, and basic medical support. Every small act, whether a warm meal, a clean blanket, or a compassionate conversation, pushes back against the crushing weight of invisibility. Safe spaces, where people are treated as human beings rather than problems to be managed, can preserve a sense of worth that homelessness so often erodes. True progress demands more than temporary measures. Affordable housing must be at the center of any long-term solution. That means not only constructing new units, but also preserving the ones that already exist, protecting them from being lost to gentrification or neglect. Without this foundation, families will continue to fall into homelessness, no matter how strong other efforts may be. Equally critical is the expansion of treatment for addiction and mental health services. The city cannot hope to end homelessness while ignoring the opioid crisis that ravages Kensington or the untreated mental illnesses that push countless people to the streets. Prevention must also become a priority. Policies that intervene early, providing rental assistance, eviction prevention, and support for families in crisis, can stop homelessness before it begins. It is always less costly, financially and humanly, to prevent the fall than to try to repair the damage after. Government cannot solve this crisis alone. Businesses have the power to provide not only training but real opportunities, jobs that restore dignity and independence. Communities must open doors rather than close them, replacing judgment with solidarity. Faith-based groups, nonprofits, and neighborhood organizations can step into gaps that government programs cannot reach, offering personal care, mentorship, and compassion. But perhaps the most important shift is cultural. We must change the way we talk about homelessness. These are not burdens to be discarded or failures to be blamed. They are human beings, neighbors, and fellow citizens who deserve help, not stigma. Every shift in perspective brings us closer to a city where empathy drives action. In an age where technology shapes every aspect of our lives, it can also be a lifeline for those on the margins. Simple apps can guide individuals to the nearest shelter, meal center, or clinic. Data can map hotspots of need, allowing resources to be directed with precision and efficiency. Digital platforms can connect people experiencing homelessness with training programs in digital literacy, giving them the tools to participate in an economy that increasingly exists online. Even something as simple as access to Wi-Fi or a phone charger can mean the difference between isolation and connection, between despair and a second chance. Innovation, when guided by compassion, can turn cold technology into warm opportunity. Philadelphia's crisis did not appear overnight, and it will not vanish with a single solution. But by combining immediate relief with long-term investment, by mobilizing communities and embracing innovation, the city can move from merely managing homelessness to actively ending it. The question is not whether we can do it, the question is whether we will. When change begins with one person, the scale of homelessness in Philadelphia can feel overwhelming, as if the problem belongs only to governments, nonprofits, or policymakers. But individuals are not powerless. In fact, change often begins at the most personal level. One act of kindness, one voice raised, one choice to see rather than to turn away. A simple donation of food, clothing, or hygiene supplies may seem small, but to someone shivering on a cold night, it can mean survival. A winter coat or a warm meal is not charity, it is dignity restored, a reminder that they are not invisible. Volunteering at shelters or with outreach programs carries an even deeper power. Beyond offering services, it builds human connections, affirming that each person has worth beyond their struggles. For many living on the streets, the rarest gift is not money or material goods, but being treated as human. Advocacy is another form of action, speaking out about the need for affordable housing, demanding more robust mental health services, or pressing leaders to address the opioid epidemic creates pressure for change at the systemic level. When citizens raise their voices together, policymakers cannot easily look away. Perhaps the most profound role of the individual lies in shifting the narrative itself. Every day, thousands of Philadelphians pass people experiencing homelessness. In those moments, each person makes a choice to avert their eyes or to truly see. A nod, a greeting, even a smile can affirm someone's humanity in a world that too often erases it. Compassion is not weakness. It is the beginning of change. And when multiplied across an entire city, compassion becomes a force strong enough to break cycles of despair and replace them with hope. Conclusion: a call to conscience. Homelessness in Philadelphia is not a temporary problem. It is a layered, complex crisis that cannot be solved with quick fixes. It demands comprehensive, coordinated effort between city leaders, community members, businesses, nonprofits, and individuals. To witness this crisis is to confront the reality of homeless in America, and to confront it is to accept a responsibility, to care, to act, and to demand better. This is not merely about statistics. It is about the woman huddled in a doorway, the child trying to study in a shelter, the man who once served his country but now sleeps under a bridge. We must refuse to let these lives remain invisible. The call is clear. Share their stories, support their recovery, challenge the systems that failed them. Philadelphia is only one city. The struggle is national, even global. But by telling these stories, by shining light on suffering, we ignite the possibility of change. This is the mission of Homeless in America today, to keep these stories alive, to keep them human, and to keep the conscience of society awake. The crisis is urgent. The need is immediate. The question is simple. Will we turn away, or will we rise to meet it? For in the end, the measure of a city, of a nation, and of each one of us is how we treat those who have nothing left but hope. And it begins by seeing them not as strangers, not as statistics, but as family in the shared story of humanity. This is Philadelphia. This is a crisis. This is homeless in America.